This is now my main sketchbook. I'm going to center this a little bit better. My main sketchbook that I used during our trip to New Zealand. For the first week we went to South Island, and the second week we were in Auckland on the North Island for the Urban Sketchers Symposium. So I tested a lot of pencils and watercolour pencils and markers. I eliminated a good few from this test, and I still took far too many with me. Lesson learned? Probably not. First sketch in Christchurch. So we flew from Dublin to Christchurch via Dubai and Sydney. It's a long flight. I think the longest leg was 12.5 hours. 7 hours from Dublin to Dubai, 12.5 hours from Dubai to Sydney, and then I think maybe just 2.5 hours to Christchurch. Long journey. And of course we were jet lagged. I think there's about 11 or 12 hours time difference. So woke up very early and went for a little walk around Christchurch and found this lovely bandstand, I suppose that's what you call it. They call it the Edmonds Band Rotunda. Yes, we woke up at 4 and went for a walk at 5:30. So this was actually damaged during the earthquake in 2011, and it was rebuilt in 2021. And I read, of course, this useful information. The dome weighs 80 tons and it sat underground for years awaiting reconstruction. And there is a river that runs in front of it. I think that's the River Avon, but it's not from Stratford upon Avon. I think it's an Avon River in Scotland that it's named after. All the little bits of information you come across when you travel. Big tree in the Botanic Gardens in Christchurch. Lovely Botanic Gardens there. We had a lovely little date scone. Very nice. Never had a date scone before. Delicious. And okay, Christchurch Cathedral under major reconstruction and repairs. So I sat in the library across the road from the cathedral. I'm going to have to open this book a little bit better. There we go. You can still see it all. Yeah. So there's a lovely library in Christchurch with great views overlooking the cathedral. So I could sit at a nice table and sketch away. And well, next time I'm over, hopefully it will be done. Christchurch is very much a city under reconstruction. There's a lot of beautiful buildings that have been built there since the earthquake, but there's still a lot of vacant lots awaiting construction, and the cathedral is work in progress. So after Christchurch, we drove to Lake Tekapo, lake that's really well known for the colour of its water, and it's not quite the turquoise I've painted there. I think that if I added a little bit of white gouache to my cobalt turquoise, it would actually have been closer to the colour. It's got this milky turquoise. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And the morning before we left Lake Tekapo, I drew the view from our Airbnb. That's the sketch at the top of the page there, and I used some neo colour to just quickly add a little bit of colour to the sketch. It was great fun, and we stopped many times on the way. This is a bit crooked, but the page is lifting, it doesn't matter. We stopped by Tekapo Canal, and I had a little bit of time to sketch the beautiful mountains and trees, and it's such a vast landscape in South Island. It's just mind-blowing, really, the scale of those mountains, those lakes, land that just changes at every turn. Wonderful place. And from Lake Tekapo we went to Lake Wanaka. I don't think I sketched there, which is a shame really, but we were only one night in Lake Wanaka. Then we went to Te Anau in the Fiordland region, And the first morning I got up early and went outside our motel. They don't call them motels anymore. I can't remember what they call them, but apparently motel is not used anymore. And it was foggy, so you could see nothing. You couldn't see the mountains, the lake and the sky were merging into one. But there was still a beautiful golden tree. It's autumn, of course, in New Zealand, when it's spring in Ireland. And some of the European trees that were brought to New Zealand many, many years ago, I'm sure, just were at the peak of golden colour. They were just fantastic. But then there's also eucalyptus from Australia, probably. I've seen none of those trees are native New Zealand trees. It's still made for interesting sketches. And then as the fog lifted, I attempted to sketch all the activity on the lake in Te Anau. So there was boats, sailing boats, helicopters, seaplanes, so many things. So I had to practice these before actually trying a sketch with them, just to try and figure out the shape of a seaplane. And the purple blob going across the sketch at the top is kind of an attempt at representing the long white cloud, which is the name of New Zealand, the land of the long white cloud. As I was travelling with Brendan, who was not a sketcher, I often got up early to sketch before we went about our day. And this was the following day in Te Anau, and the sun was not up yet, but it was lighting the mountains in the background, and the light was just changing by the moment. And I just did this in direct watercolour. And the next stop was Queenstown. I wasn't that impressed with Queenstown. Too busy, too built up. But yet when you look out the window from your hotel room, this is the view you've got. So really impressive mountains and the lake, all beautiful if you look away from the busyness of it all. This one was just before we went to the airport. We were flying from Queenstown to Auckland that day, and I just did a quick pencil sketch, and I was using a fairly soft pencil, so I didn't want it to go smudging everywhere, and I just applied a light layer of watercolour, and I think that's worked. Oh, and by the way, this is a Hahnemühle 100% cotton watercolour sketchbook, which I found very hard to use over the first few days of our trip, because despite the lovely weather, it was quite humid, well, particularly when it was foggy, so it was taking forever for the watercolour to dry. I think I'll be used to that in Dublin, but there you go. Airport sketch. That's waiting for our flight from Queenstown to Auckland. And I'd drawn the little man who was looking at his phone at the airport. And then the plane arrived, and I thought, oh, I should have drawn the little man in the bottom here and then have lots of room for the plane. But I hadn't figured out that's where the plane would go. I should have really sussed it out before starting to sketch. And then little washi tape at the bottom. Was very excited to find that there is a Daiso shop in Auckland, basically a £1 shop, like a deals shop, everything cheap. It comes from Japan, and I could spend the rest of my days in that shop. Now, first day in Auckland. Just going to fold this again. First day in Auckland, and met up with Deb from Perth, Australia, and we met in Porto and in Amsterdam, and we hadn't seen each other since 2019, so we were very happy, and we went sketching together. This is not a very successful sketch, but still it was good to get a sketch out of the way and just get the energy transferred onto the paper just before the symposium started. Now, the view from my hotel window, the Sky Tower in Auckland. Some people go bungee jumping. Okay, not really bungee jumping, but jumping from there. We saw some people walking there. Crazy stuff. Why do people do that? I have no idea. And okay, this is a view near City Hall and Aotea Square in Auckland still. And you know, the Sky Tower is everywhere. You can't really sketch any city views without it appearing somewhere. And this sketch, like, this is really what comes naturally to me. I have no focus, no sense of what my story is. I just see something I'm interested in and I start sketching. And this is how this sketch evolves. So it's a bit of everything. You know, I found every little bit of this view interesting. So I had to capture it all. Then I ran out of time. This one is the Civic Theatre in Auckland. It was like an Art Deco type building. Really, it was a building I was kind of a bit scared to sketch, but we were sitting at a cafe called Remedy, and it had a perfect view, so we had to sketch it. And I just used a turquoise pencil, which is what I tend to use if I'm really not sure how something is going to work out, because you can always draw over it and it won't be too strong, so you can modify things. But anyway, I just decided to leave it as is. People at the bus stop, and they still have telephone booths in New Zealand. I don't think we have telephone booths anymore. Everybody's got a mobile phone, but they probably don't use them, but they're still there. This was after registration at the AUT, the Auckland University of Technology, which was the hub, the venue for the Urban Sketchers Symposium. Great venue, so much space, great facilities, really the perfect venue, and everything was organised so well at the symposium. My congratulations to the whole team and all the volunteers who organised this. So, well, I was just there to sketch and have fun, so I kind of sketched people who were around me, such as Deb there and Dennis, Lynn, Vinicia and Brian. None of them will recognise themselves. And no, Dennis is not wearing a hard hat. He had a cap, but you know, I just have problems with proportions. Well, still a good bit to go. So if you're still with me, this was the first day of the workshops, and I arrived a little bit early at the hub and sketched the trees that were in front of me, the bridge that goes over the busy road across, and I had to draw a few cars. So there you go, kind of a warm-up sketch. And back to the pagoda building. Somebody says it was a backpacker hotel. It looked more like an office block, but there you go. So this was a workshop with Eleanor Doughty, and the theme of the workshop was how to use calligraphy pens in your sketch. And it was fantastic. She's a great instructor, and learned so much. And as you can see, the sketch is much better than the previous one, I think, of the same building. I'm very happy with how it turned out. And so it was just really I used the Pilot parallel pen, which you can have really fine lines and really thick lines, and I used watercolour then. Well, the red bit was initially a wash of red watercolour before I started sketching, and then I built it up bit by bit. That same afternoon, we had a sketch walk at Freiburg Square. I think I got that right. And I used the techniques I had learned from Eleanor's workshop that morning. There was hundreds of sketchers around the square, everywhere, and but also some high-rise buildings, which are perfect for the Pilot parallel pen. You know, you can just do those windows so quickly, get really strong blacks really quickly, and also fine lines. So I had great fun. following morning at the hub, as always, I arrived a bit early, and Eric was busy working at the table. I had to sketch him. And Eric is the events director in Urban Sketchers, and he's also an admin for Urban Sketchers Auckland. So he was very involved in the organisation of the symposium, and they all did a fantastic job. Just thank you, that's all I can say. And as you can see, the fashion is no longer business cards. People give stickers, and if you scan this one, you'll get the workshop handout from Oliver. And so, and I'll talk to you about him in a few minutes. I've got another sketchbook where I took notes from his demo. The workshop I did that morning was with Marina Grichanik from Tel Aviv, and it was all about sketching people in motion. So we started with some blind contour, and wonderful, again, a wonderful instructor who broke down the scary task of drawing people into manageable chunks. So after the blind contour, we were working in shapes and adding line. The area we were in was near Queen's Wharf, at the end of Queen Street, and there was a lot of construction workers there, and they were quite happy. Well, not all of them so happy, but some of them were kind of happy to pose as models for us. The next stage in the workshop, we were working in negative shape and also positive shapes, and then adding line. And this guy represents New Zealand in weightlifting. He was very happy with the sketch. I think I made him look like a very nice chap that he was. Here, I'm not sure, I was getting a bit tired, I think, and was trying to do something more abstract with everything that was in front of me. The strange device that you see here, I can't remember what it is. It's a like a motor car, long motor car running on wind, and I think it was attempting to break a land speed record. Probably did. Brendan could tell you more about it than I can. There we were doing people in motion, so the same person moving, exaggerating their movement, trying to express the dynamic movement of sketching people. I used a Koh-i-Noor magic pencil, which I think was perfectly suited to the job. And then my final sketch with at Marina's workshop, combining basically everything we had learned, and it was great fun. Loved it. Felt much more confident drawing people than I would have been before. Next day was a workshop with Marie-Helene from Malaysia, I think. Again, a very interesting workshop where we learned to draw our focal point with a calligraphy pen, and then use a liquid charcoal. Really, she gave us little samples of her own mix of charcoal powder mixed with water and then dried, and you can add water to it, so you get all sorts of good effects, and it certainly sets the background away from the foreground, makes it very three-dimensional. Really interesting technique. But charcoal kind of smudges a bit, so for the page there, just stop the smudging. And then we were nearly done. We went to a nice cafe, Paname Social, and Deb and myself just went there for a quiet time and sketching. There was people beside us chatting away. I think they were vaguely aware I was sketching them, but they never came to inquire. And here I actually used a technique from Oliver Hurler, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, sorry Oliver, kind of connecting different elements of the sketch, so that the green line is kind of a very simple device to connect elements that are not together in the same plane, the same view. So I had the wall with the people in the distance, and the plants and the lampshade, And then to my right, I had the two people chatting, and I kind of connected those two sketches. So kind of a useful technique. And once you start sketching, you can't stop. I think I was on my own here on Queen Street, and there was a shop there, and palm trees. We don't have palm trees like that in Ireland, so I had to sketch those. They were so exotic. And then I think this was the day after the symposium. At that stage, I still hadn't gone to Albert Park, which was just across the road from the university. But it's a steep hill, and finally got there and drew this magnificent tree. Apparently it's a tree that originates in Australia, but it just was so big and so amazing, with roots going everywhere. I loved it. And then it was time to go, and we took an Air New Zealand flight to Perth. And well, actually the plane we took wasn't the one I drew. The flight was subcontracted to Wamos, a Spanish airline company, but the service was great, and lovely flight from Auckland to Perth, which is 7 hours. You kind of think, oh yeah, that's not too far. Well, 7 hours is still a long flight, but everything ran smoothly. And then I did a sketch of Brendan with me, who's been there the whole time supporting me. We booked all the flights, all the hotels and everything, and was happy to hang about as I was sketching my way through Auckland and New Zealand and Perth. So there you go. So I think this is the end of this book. Yes, it is. More to come, of course.